Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Wednesday webinar on Microsoft Forms. My name is Juan Cuellar, and I will be your presenter for today. Now, a couple of housekeeping things before we jump in. As you can see, today's schedule is, or the schedule for today's webinar is here on my slide. It is a 1-hour webinar, so we will go from 11:30 through about 12:30. Now we have a great presentation and demo for you on Microsoft Forms. So here's how we'll go about this. We'll go through the presentation, we'll provide you a demo on how you can get started with Microsoft Forms. And then towards the end of the webinar, we'll open up for Q&A. All right. Now, you guys are welcome to post any questions, comments, or concerns at any moment during the presentation, but we will address those once we open up for Q&A at the end of the webinar. Now, if you'd like to post any questions, comments, or concerns, today we are using GoToWebinar. And the first thing you'll want to do to provide any questions, comments, or concerns for the Q&A portion is, first of all, locate the little vertical toolbar that should be on the right side of your screen. On that toolbar, you're going to see the orange button with a white arrow that opens the control panel. Now, when you click on it and open up the control panel, you'll see on the bottom part, there's the questions pane. Now, I'll be the only one that sees your questions, comments, or concerns, so you are welcome to post them there whenever you have any, and we'll address those towards the end of the webinar. All right, enough housekeeping for today. Let's jump in. Now, let's start off by discussing exactly what is Microsoft Forms. Well, Microsoft Forms is an online application that is included with your organization's Microsoft 365 that you can use to create surveys, quizzes, or polls. So you can use Microsoft Forms anytime you want to collect information from your audience. For example, schools can use it to create quizzes, collect feedback, or plan activities. Businesses can use it to collect customer feedback, check employee satisfaction, make improvements, or organize company events. Now, as we mentioned, Microsoft Forms is an app that falls under the Microsoft 365 umbrella. So one of the quickest ways to access Microsoft Forms is from the Microsoft 365 portal. So let's get started by jumping into the portal. Now, let me move my presentation out of the way, and I'm going to simply open up my preferred browser. And to access the Microsoft 365 portal, all you got to do is go to Microsoft365.com. Now, if this is the first time you're going to the website, it will prompt you to sign in, which you can do using your work email and associated password. Now, when you get to the portal, this is going to be the portal page, and it's going to provide you with a ton of resources. But to access Microsoft Forms, what you want to do is you want to look towards the top left where you have this button with these little dots. Now, technically, this button is called the App Launcher, but a lot of people refer to it as the waffle because it kind of looks like one, right? Well, when you click on the App Launcher, you'll get a list of apps that you have available. Now, notice Microsoft Forms does show up for me here, but if Forms does not show up for you, because this is a curated list of apps that you have recently accessed. So if this is the first time, you may not see Forms. So what you could do is go down to all apps, where you'll get a comprehensive list of all of the apps that are available to you through Microsoft 365. Now, this is alphabetically sorted, so you'll notice that here I see Forms. When I click on it, it takes me to the Forms online app. Now, when you first go to the Forms online app, it's going to give you a list of recent forms that you have accessed. Now, if this is your very first time in Forms, you may not see any here, and that's okay, because through your use of Microsoft Forms, it will start accumulating a list of all the forms here that you can access and go from there. But now that we're here in Microsoft Forms, let's take a look at how to create a form. Well, some of you might be thinking, well, that's obvious. We have a button right across the top that says New Form. So when you click on it, it does just that. You'll notice that it provides you with a brand new form. Now, since it's a brand new form, it does say that it is untitled. So obviously, the first thing you want to do is you want to give your form a name or a title. So you can click where it says untitled, and then you can enter your form name. Now, remember, there are endless uses for creating forms. In the example that I'm going to use in today's webinar, I'm going to create a class evaluation. Let's say that every time I provide a class for my colleagues, I want to collect some feedback. So that's what I'm going to call my form. I'm going to call it class evaluation. Now, you'll notice that as I'm adding my information, over on the right-hand side, it's showing me some suggestions on the themes for, or the style of my form. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. Now, let's say that I'd like to incorporate an image for my form. Well, you'll notice that right next to the title field, there's a little icon where I can add an image. Now, I can add an image by searching online through Bing. I can add an image that I may have in OneDrive, or I could upload one from my computer. Now, let's say that I don't have an image in mind yet, but I have kind of an idea of what I want. So I'm going to search in Bing. I'm going to search for evaluation and then press enter. And notice right away, it starts giving me all of these different search results for images that I could use. So let's say I like this one here, this is called evaluation. So I'm going to select it, then I'm going to click add, and notice it adds it to my form, to the top of my form. Now you'll also notice that right below the title, I also have a form description where you can give a little bit more details about what's the purpose of the form, what type of information is going to be collected, what it's going to be used for. So I'm just going to put in there a little note that says, thank you for attending our training. In efforts to improve our training, we'd love to collect, or we'd love to hear your feedback. Please fill out this form truthfully. So again, a little bit more of a description or details on that form. Once I'm finished, I can click off of it, and there you are. So now that I have provided a title and a description and even a picture, now I can start adding the questions that I want to ask in the form, or the different pieces of information. Now, there are different types of questions that you can add. You'll notice that here we have the button that says add new. When you click add new, it starts giving you the different types of questions. Do you want to add a choice question? Do you want to add a text question, a rating, a date? So let's take a look at a couple of examples. Let's say that I want to ask for the instructor of the class that they took. So I'm going to provide a choice question, and it first asks for the question. So I'm going to say, who was your instructor? Now, again, this is a choice question. So you'll notice it gives us different options that we can add. And of course, you can enter each option here. I'm just going to copy and paste them. And there we are. Now, those are the 3 standard instructors that we use. But I will say that from time to time, we may use other instructors. So I want to give the users the ability to provide a name if we use a different instructor. So notice down here, it says add other option. So it'll allow the users to select other, and then they can type the instructor's name in there. So you can see it makes it really easy to add a choice question. Let me add another one. At some point in my form, I want to ask them if they want to provide more feedback. Now, again, notice how this is really nice about forms. It reads the context of your question and it provides suggestions. Now, if you like those suggestions, you can click on them to insert them, or you can just go in there and enter your own values. So again, that's how easy it is to add a choice question. Now, let's say that I also want to ask for the title of the class that they took. Well, we offer tons of courses, so I don't want to provide a drop-down menu of tons of titles, but rather I want them to type it in. So in that case, I'm going to go to add new, but instead of a choice question, I'm going to use the text. So when I want them to enter or to type their response, I'm going to select the text and I'm going to ask them for the class title. I'm also going to ask them for their name, but then I'm going to ask them for some additional feedback. So let's say I want to ask them for the strength of the course. So I'm going to add a text field for that. But when it comes to the class title, that's relatively a short response. Their name, that's a short response. But when it comes to questions like, what were the strengths of the course? Or what if I want to ask if they have any suggestions or recommendations? Or if I want to ask, do they have any additional comments they want to provide? You can anticipate that these responses may be a little bit more lengthy. So here's what you can do. For the text questions whose responses are going to be a little bit more lengthy, you can enable the long answer option. Now, that doesn't change how long their answer can be. Their answer can be up to 4,000 characters in any text question. But what it does is, notice in their answer field, when you enable it, it makes it a multiple line field. So it's going to be easier for them to provide a longer response. So I'm going to do that with those last 3 questions. Now let's keep going. Let's see what other types of fields we may have. We can click add and notice there's a rating. And under rating, of course, it asks for the question. I'm going to ask them to give an overall class rating. You can change the number of levels. You can change which icons. Now, I personally like a 5-star rating scale, so I'm going to leave it at that. But again, it is customizable. But we also want to know when they took the class, what date was the class taken on. So I'm going to click add new and notice we have a date question. So I'm going to ask for the class date. Now, I also want to get some feedback as to what time of the day is most convenient for them to take training. And that'll affect when during the day I will offer future classes. So notice that in this case, I'm going to go back to add new. Now, I could provide a choice field, but I don't want just one answer. What I want is for them to rank which times of the day is most convenient for them. So check this out. While we have the choice, text, ratings, or dates, notice we have a drop down of many more choices. And here we have a ranking option. So I'm going to ask which training times are most convenient for you. And the options I'm going to provide are morning sessions, lunch and learn sessions, or afternoon sessions. And this option is going to be designed for the users to rearrange them in the order from most convenient to least convenient. All right, and we'll see how that works in just a little bit. Now, remember how I asked them for an overall rating, overall class rating, but you may want them to rate different aspects of the class. So when you have multiple rating questions, you do not want to add multiple rating questions individually. Well, let me show you what's a better alternative. I'm going to go back to add new, go back to the drop down, and notice there is an option here called Likert. Now, Likert allows people to rate multiple statements. So let me show you what this is going to look like. I'm going to add a Likert. Now, it does ask for a general question for the overall Likert. So I'm going to ask them to rate the following. Now, notice it gives option 1, 2, 3, up to 5 options for the ratings. So you want to add whatever rating titles you need. And down the left, you can add all of the statements you want them to rate. So what I'm going to do is option 1, I'm going to add poor. Option 2, I'm going to add fair. Option 3, I'm going to add satisfactory, and then good, and finally, last one, I'll use excellent. So now that I have the rating titles, I can now start adding all of the statements I want them to rate. So I'm going to click where it says statement 1, and I'm going to add in there the course objectives were fulfilled. The second statement I want them to rate, the presenter was well organized. Now I have 2 more, so notice I can click add statement, and I'm going to add the instructor showed good command of the subject matter, and the last one will add the instructor responded to the needs of the group. So you can see that now we're asking them to rate multiple statements without having to add individual questions, making the survey that much longer. So now by using the Likert, we consolidated them a little bit and we are good to go. All right. Now, the next option is if we go back to new, the dropdown, notice there is a net promoter score. Have you ever seen where companies ask, how likely are you to recommend us? That's essentially what this is. So when you click on net promoter score, it gives you a recommendation on how to ask the question, but you can reword it. So I'm going to put in there, how likely are you to recommend this training to a colleague? And then notice you can even customize the labels, not likely at all or extremely likely. You can leave the default one or put in your own custom labels there. All right. Well, that is how you can start, one, creating the form, adding the questions, and you can see it makes it really easy to just start popping them in there, right? Now that you've added the questions, we want to talk about how can we manage the questions? Because there's a lot of different options that we have for managing questions. For example, in some cases, the questions may be required. In other scenarios, some questions may be optional. So let me show you how to identify which questions are required. So for example, in an evaluation, I absolutely need to know who the instructor was. So I'm going to select that question, and you'll notice we simply have a toggle switch here to make that question required. That's it. Now, I'm going to go through all the questions that I want to make required, and I'm going to just turn on that little required here. Now, I definitely need the class title. Let's say that I'm going to need their name. In terms of the strengths of the course, suggestions, additional comments, let's say that is optional, but I definitely want the overall rating of the class. And let's say I also need the date of the class, so I'll make that required, and all of the ratings under the Likert. So again, you can see that you can go through and identify which questions are required, and as usual, it identifies the required questions with a little asterisk at the end of the question name. Now, in some cases, you may also want to add additional information or instructions under a particular question. So for example, under the first question that says, who was your instructor? I may want to ask them to select the instructor for their class or enter it in the other field. So again, just a little bit more guidance. This can be done using what's called a subtitle. So notice if I select that question, notice on the bottom, I can click more settings for that question. And here I can select subtitle. Notice it added the subtitle field here, and I can put in there more details such as select the instructor for your class. If your instructor's name does not appear, please enter it in other. So again, sometimes it might be real nice, real helpful to be able to add additional information in a subtitle, more directions, whatever you may need. Now, when you add a question, you may later change your mind. Let's say that I actually don't need the your name field. Let's say that I'm actually going to have the form automatically record who submitted those responses. So if you no longer need a question, you can just select it. And then notice on the top right, we have the little delete icon. Now, one thing I do want to mention, in Microsoft Forms, there is no undo. There is no undo. So if you delete a question and then later change your mind, you will need to recreate it. But the good news is, you see how easy it is to create a question. Now, the other thing that you may need to do is to rearrange your questions. So you may have added the questions in a particular order, but later you might want to rearrange them. So for example, maybe the first question I want is to ask is the class title. Right now, that's question number 3. Now, here's the nice thing. You can rearrange your questions in one of two ways. You can either click on the question. Now, here's what I want you to notice. The number next to the question here, I can now use these up or down arrows on the top right to rearrange it. So notice I click the up arrow. Now that's question number 2. And now the class title is question number 1. It's that easy. Now, what if then I want to ask for the class date or the date of the class. Well, I look for that question, and another option to rearrange them is you can click on the little dots here on the top when you just hover over it, and notice as you click and hold, it's going to allow you to drag them in the proper order. So you can see that it makes it really easy to rearrange them. So for example, if I want the liker to be number 4, I just click on that. Oh, let me try that one more time. I just click on those little dots and I just drag it to be number 4. And I'm just going to go through each one of those and make sure that the questions are in the order that provides the best flow. Okay. Let's see here. So then I want to add this one up here. And let's see, let's do this one here. And let's add, let's see, this one, I'm going to move it down here. All right. So you'll notice that now I rearranged it to ask for the title of the class, the date of the class, the instructor. Then I jump into the rating. So I jump into, please rate the following, which times are, oh, and actually, then I want to ask for the overall class rating. Then I'm going to ask for what's most convenient, how likely are they to share, and then I'm going to ask if they want to provide more details or more feedback, at which point I'll ask them for those long open-ended questions. So you can see that we can easily rearrange the questions anytime we need. Now, I don't know about you, but this form is starting to get a little lengthy. It's starting to get quite lengthy. And honestly, it's not even that bad compared to some other forms I've seen. It has 11 questions. I've seen some forms that have about 30. But here's what I'm trying to get to. When you have long forms, it might help to break it up. Now, how can we break up our forms? Well, in Microsoft Forms, there's this thing called sections, and sections are used to group similar questions and to break up the form into different pages. Now, let me show you what this does. As you're designing your form, you may want to get a preview of what it currently looks like. So notice on the top right, you have a preview button. And notice this is what the form will look like to the people filling it out. So you can see that you can scroll down and fill out all of that, but you can see that it's quite lengthy as they scroll down. Now, as a side note, the preview defaults to a, well, excuse me, it defaults to a computer view, but notice you can also switch it to a mobile view, which will show you what the form would look like on a mobile device. You see that? But the point is, either way, this form is getting a little lengthy. So what I want to do is I want to break it up into different sections, Now, watch how we're going to do this. I want to break up questions 1, 2, and 3 and break those separately from questions 4 going on. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on the last question that I want in the first section, because notice it allows me to insert something right after the selected question. So what I'm going to go to, I'm going to click Insert New. Now, at first, it gives me options to insert new questions, which can come in handy. But notice when I expand this drop-down menu, I also have the option for section. And notice that now, after question 3, it now says, okay, well, now you have the beginning of section 2 before question 4. And each section can have its own title and subtitle. Now for section 2, I am going to call that ratings, because this is going to ask all of the ratings from the user. So I'm going to call section 2 ratings. Now, that means that above section 2, I now have a section 1. But where's the title? Well, the title is in this blank area. So in there, I'm going to call section 1 class information. So now section 1 will ask for the class information, such as the title, the date, and the instructor. Section 2 will ask for all the rating information. But then I want to also separate these last 3 questions where they can provide additional information to their own section. So I'm going to select this question. I'm going to insert another section that'll break it up into a third section, and I'll call that additional feedback. So notice I've just broken up this 11 question form into 3 different sections to make it more manageable into smaller bite size. Now let's preview this. Let's see what this does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the preview and notice, okay, now it says, okay, here's the title, here's the information. Notice it's now telling me, well, you're going to be asked the class information. So it's going to ask me for the title, and I'll just answer some sample information there. It asks for the date. So let's say I took the class yesterday. Here's the instructor. And notice that now it doesn't right away jump into question 4, but it allows me to click next once I'm ready for the next section. And now it's telling me, okay, now you're in ratings, and it lets me go in here and rate the items. Notice for the ranking, remember I said you can drag and drop them in whatever order works best for you, or you can use these little arrows as well. So you can see you can answer them, and then when you click next, it brings you to the last section where you have additional feedback, where you can type in additional answers there. So you see how it breaks it up into smaller chunks. So adding sections can be real handy. But yet there's still another feature that I think is real valuable. In particular, when you have long forms, there is this feature called branching. Now, branching is based on the responses that the users are going to provide to specific questions. It allows you to configure the form to change or skip subsequent answers if not relevant. So let me give you an example. It asks for the class information such as the title, the date, and the instructor. After that, it jumps into the ratings where it asks them to rate all of the following statements. It asks for the overall class rating. It asks for what time is most convenient for them, how likely are they to recommend us. But notice question number 8 says, would you like to provide additional feedback? And the 2 options says, yes, please, or no, thank you. Now, if they do want to provide additional feedback, then I absolutely wanted to continue to the 3rd section where I'm asking for the strengths of the course, suggestions and recommendations, and then additional comments. But here's the thing, if they don't need to provide additional feedback, then I don't want it to take them to the last 3 questions because they already told me they don't. So what I wanted to do is instead is to send them to the end of the form and skip that last section. So let me show you how we can set up that branching logic. I'm going to go ahead and click on the question where I want to apply branching logic. Then on the bottom right, I'm going to click the ellipsis for more settings. And notice here I have add branching. When I click Add Branching, notice that each answer in a choice question can take its own direction. So it says, if they respond, yes, please, where do we want to go? Well, if they respond, yes, please, I want them to go to the third section called Additional Feedback. But if they respond, no, thank you, that they don't want to provide more feedback, then I definitely don't want it to go to the next 3 questions. So instead, I'm going to have it end the form. So you can see how, based off of their response, the form will take different directions or different branches, if you will. Now, once I'm finished adding the branch logic, I can click back on the top left, and that's it. And that's it. Now, I do want to add that if you do add branching logic, the title will show you this little icon letting you know that somewhere in the form, branching has been enabled. Now, at this point, I have finished developing the form, but when you preview it, the default design looks a little bland, looks a little blah, right? So what I want to show you is that you can also customize the style or the theme of your form. To do so, you'll notice that on the top right, we already talked about the preview button. Now we want to talk about the style button. Now, in some cases, this button may be called theme. So either way, you can click on it and notice how it's going to provide you with different options, different suggestions. Or you can go down and select different colors, or you can even create your own theme. Now, I'm looking at these here, and some of these look quite nice. So notice there's this one here, and when I click on it, notice it'll give me a little preview of what it'll look like. And then, of course, I can click the preview window, and then notice this is what it'll look like. Pretty nice, right? But let's say I kind of like this one here, so let me click on it. Look at that. So let's preview it. So notice it gives you a nice little preview, the title, the description. You can click start, and then you can start on it and then just go from there. Now, if this background is a little too busy for certain people, they can stop that background video. So they'll have that option if they want. But again, you can go through and customize it. Now, let's say I kind of like this one here. Let's take a look at this one. So this one looks nice and professional, presentable there. Now, I also want to add that even though you're selecting pre-made designs, down here, you can go in and customize it. So you can either select a different color theme, or you can click the plus to provide your own background image, or you can provide your own custom color to the theme. Now, you would need to provide the hex number if you have a custom color that you'd like to use. But I'm actually kind of happy with the theme that I have now. Let's do one last preview. Notice it shows me some information, and then it jumps into the form itself. Okay, very good. Now, I've customized the theme, but now let's talk about how can we configure the form settings. Because there are many settings that can be customized for your form that you may want to consider. To access the settings, you're going to go all the way to the top right and click this ellipsis that's called More Form Settings. From there, you'll have different options. We're going to just select Settings. And notice it's going to give us tons of settings. Now, the first setting is probably one of the most important ones. Who can fill out this form? Now, notice you have 3 options. You can make this form available to anyone. Now, anyone means anyone that gets a hold of the link to the form. That might be your colleagues, that might be people external to your organization. Now, if maybe this form only needs to be available to people within your organization, notice you can select the option that says only people in my organization can respond. Now, if you select anyone, if you need to make this form available to people outside of your organization, here's the thing. All responses will be anonymous. Microsoft Forms will not be able to automatically determine who they are. Now, you can add questions for their names and their contact information and make those required, right? So that is a way around it. But notice, remember how I deleted the your name question? That's because I'm going to make this form available only to people in my organization. And when I select that, notice I can have it record their names. I can have it record their names. Now, when I have it record the names, it'll tell me who they are. So it'll tell me who in my organization submitted that response, and it'll tell me their email address. Now, if I also needed to, I can also prevent people from submitting it more than once. I could limit it to one response per person. But I anticipate that the same person may take multiple classes, so I'm not going to enable that. Now, if you do record their names, it will let the respondents know that. Let me show you what that looks like. When I preview the form and I go to start now, notice it says, hi, Sheldon. So notice right away, and by the way, I'm logged in as Sheldon. He's my training account. So it knows who you are. And then it says, when you submit this form, the owner will see your name and email. You see that? Now, if I wanted, I can make the form anonymous by telling it not to record the name. And you'll notice that when I preview it this time, it no longer tells me that the owner will see who they are. You see that? Now, in this case, I actually do want to record their name just so you can see what that looks like. Now, the third option is, so again, we said only people in the organization. Now, this means anyone in your organization. Now, you could select specific people in your organization. And if you select specific people, when you share it, which we'll go through in just a bit, when you share it, you will be asked, who do you want to share it with? But I'm going to make it available to anyone in my organization. Now, as we scroll down, we have many more options. So notice we can enable accept responses, meaning, do you want to turn the form on so people can respond? There may be a time where you want to turn it off, so you can just uncheck it. Now, I do want to turn it on, so I'll leave it on, but then you can specify from what date to what date you want to accept responses. You can set a limit on how much time people have to fill out their response. In certain cases, you can shuffle questions. Now, notice this one here says show progress bar. This is particularly helpful when you add sections, because right now, again, if I go to preview and I start the form, notice I'm starting to fill it out, right? And if I click continue, notice it gives me more questions. And then I see that I can click continue or next rather. So I don't know how far I've gotten or how much more time I need. So let me show you. If you go to the settings and enable show progress bar, now when I show this, notice that it shows me this little progress bar and it shows me that this is one of 3 pages. So I know how far I've gotten, how much more I still have left. Okay, now there are a lot of other options here. You can hide submit another response. What that means is when people respond and they submit it, they'll be by default allowed to submit another response right away. But if you don't want that, we can hide that by clicking that little check. And at the end, when they submit a response, they'll be given a standard thank you message, but it's a good idea to customize it and provide your own. So I'm going to check customize thank you message. Notice the default one says your response was submitted, but you can go in there and enter your own custom message to say whatever you needed to say. Now, one last thing before we finish the settings, notice that you can choose to allow the recipients to get a receipt for their response, or you can choose to get a notification every time a response is submitted. Now, again, that's up to you if you want those notifications. Okay, now once I'm finished, I can close the settings, and that's all set to go. So at this point, I have actually finalized not only developing, but designing my form, and I am ready to start sharing it. Now, how do I make this form available for people? How do I make this form available for people? Well, I'll tell you what, there are multiple ways that you can distribute the form. So let me give you a couple of options here. Let me show you a couple of options. Once you're ready to start to allow people to submit their responses, notice you have an option here that says collect responses. When you click on it, notice that over here, it kind of has you confirm who can respond. Can anyone respond? People in your organization or specific people? You see that? Now, it has you confirm, do you want to record the names or do you want to limit the number of responses per person? I already went through the settings, so that's ready to go. So over here, I have these 4 options. I can share it by copying this link and then sending it out. I can share it by sending out an invitation. Now, I can send an invitation either through an Outlook email or through a Teams message, right? So you can use either one of those. Now, let me show you some additional options you have. You can also have it create a QR code. Now, what's a QR code? Well, a QR code is a little code that any user can point their phone cameras to, and it'll link them to the form. So if you're gonna post this link to the form, maybe in the classroom, or you're gonna post it on a big screen or the projector, this would be a nice way to have people submit their form. They can point their phones, get to the form, submit it from their mobile device, and they're set to go. Now, if you have your own website or SharePoint site that you want to embed that form to, notice you can also get the embed code. Now, here's the thing. Using this embed code does take a little programming. So if you're not familiar with how to program websites or web pages, this may not be the best option for you. So, but the point is, you have multiple ways to share the form. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to click the link option, and notice here's the link. Now, the links are long by default. If you don't care, that's fine. You can just copy it. But if you want, you can shorten the link by checking that, and that makes it a little bit more user-friendly. So whether you use the long link or the short link, you can just then click copy, and now you can send it to whoever you want. You can post it on a document, you can email it, you can send it through Teams, however you want to distribute the link. But let me show you what that's going to look like. So I'm going to open up another browser here, and I'm going to paste that link. And when I press enter, notice it takes them directly to the form. It gives them the basic information, and then it says start now. And when they start, notice here's information. So the first class is the class title. Let's say I took a Microsoft Teams class. Let's say that class was on Monday the 6th, and let's say Randy was the instructor. Then I can click next. Now it asks me to rate the different statements, and I'm just going to go through and provide my feedback, the overall class rating, what session time it works best, how likely am I to recommend? I'll give it a 7. Now, check this out. Remember the branching? It says, would you like to provide additional feedback? If I click yes, notice it keeps it as next. If I click no, notice it changes the next button to submit, meaning you are all done. Now, let's say I do want to provide feedback. So I'm going to go to yes, please, and click next. Notice it takes me to the last 3 questions. The strengths of the course. Let's say the instructor was great. Instructor was great. Any suggestions or recommendations? Provide coffee and donuts. Let's say I don't have any additional comments. I can click submit. And that's it. And by the way, notice my custom thank you message is displayed. Now, I'm going to submit 2 more just so we can see what those responses look like. Over here, I'm logged in as a different user, so I'm going to click Start Now. And again, which class did I attend? Let's say it was an Excel pivot tables. And let's say that class was yesterday. So I'm going to type in the 7th. Let's say the instructor was Barbara. Next, the class was outstanding. So I'll give it all 5 stars. I am definitely likely to recommend. Now, do I need to provide more info? Let's say, you know what, in this case, I don't have any more feedback, so I'm going to select no. So notice instead of taking me to those last 3 questions, I can just submit it from there, and that's it. Now, one more. Let's take a look here. So in here, I'm logged in as, again, yet another user. So I'm going to go, and let's say this one was also the Microsoft Teams overview class, right? Let's say this class was, again, on Monday. The instructor was Randy. Next. And we'll just give some ratings here. Okay. All right, and let's say this person doesn't have any more feedback, so we'll just submit it, and that's it. Okay, so I quote unquote published the form by sharing the link. At this point, the only thing that's left is to go review the responses. Now, I'm going to start from scratch. So to review the responses, as usual, we start off by going to Microsoft365.com. Then we go back to the Forms app by clicking the waffle, go to Forms, and you'll notice that when I go to the Forms app, now I see that brand new form that I created. So and notice it's reflecting that it has 3 responses already. So now, whenever I need to see the responses, I can click on it. Now, when you click on it, notice it takes you to the questions, which is where we designed the form. But to see the responses, notice across the top, I see a responses tab. So I see the questions tab, which is the default, but I also see the responses tab, and it tells me how many responses I have. So when I click on it, let me close this little section here. Notice that when I first go to the responses, it gives me some quick analysis. Right away, it shows me some of the latest responses to question 1, so I can see some of the latest responses. I could also click more details to show me all of the responses to that question. The responses for the question 2 Again, I can click more details and notice how it does identify the different people who have responded. You see that? Because I did configure this form to record those responses. Now, for certain types of questions, it's able to give me some quick analysis. So notice 2/3 of the responses have been for Randy's class. 1/3 have been for Barbara's class. Now, again, if you want to see more details, you can click more details and you can see those there. And then for like the ratings, notice it's showing me the ratings. So notice in this case, the course objectives, we're getting some poor responses, which is not good. So now I know that I need to go talk to my instructors and see what's going on. You see that? And then you'll see that I'm getting an overall 4-point average rating. I can click here to see the details and see the individual responses for that question. And I can just keep on going and seeing all the information. Now, again, this is a quick analysis of all the responses. So it's giving me like a summary of all the responses. But in some cases, you may need to view each response individually. Now, across the top is giving me how many responses I have, the average amount of time that it takes for people to respond, and then it tells me if the form is active or not. But right below that, you see view results. Well, when I click view results, notice it shows me the first respondent. And notice how it tells me who it is. Now, remember, I told it to record the names. That's why it can tell me who it is. If I did not have it record the names, or if this form was available for anyone outside of my organization, it would just say anonymous. But now I can see Sheldon's response and scroll down, and I can see all of his exact responses for the entire form. You see that? Now, what if I want to see the next response? I could do one of a couple of things. I can either click the next arrow, and notice it jumps me to response number 2 from Phoebe, and I can see all of their responses. I could click in the response and enter a response number, and notice it jumped me to response number 3 by Dwight, and I can see their details. Or I can click on the name of the respondents, and it gives me a drop-down menu of all the responses, and I can jump back and forth. So this is how I can see all of the individual responses. So when we go to the response tab, I can either review the summary, I can view the individual results, or if you need to run some analysis of those responses, notice we can also open it in Excel. So if I click open in Excel, notice how it downloads an Excel file. And if I open it up, give me 1 second here to open it up. Notice here is a little table with all the responses. It gives the responses an ID number. It tells me when they started to fill out the form and when they completed it. Now, because I had the form record who the respondents were, it's able to tell me the names and the email addresses for those respondents. If the form was anonymous, these 2 columns would just be empty. But then it jumps into all the questions. So what was the class title, the class date, and so on and so forth. And I can see all the responses here. I can run calculations, create charts, pivot tables, whatever type of analysis I need. I now have the data available here in Excel. But guess what? That is an introduction to Microsoft Forms. That is an introduction to Microsoft Forms. And with just a couple of minutes left, we're going to go ahead and open up for Q&A. So if any of you have any questions, comments, or concerns on anything we've discussed, you are more than welcome to post them in the questions pane that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. Now I see a couple of questions that says, I don't have the Bing. Okay, so I believe you're referring to when I was designing my form. Let's go back to the questions here. And let's go back to, let's see here. Oh, hold on. Let's go back to a more basic style. Let's go back to this one here. Here we go. So when I was adding the title, I showed you how you can add images. And one option is to do an image search. Now, because this is a Microsoft product, it is going to use Bing as the search engine instead of like Google or some other search engine, right? But you should have the option to either select an image that you have in your OneDrive, upload an image from your computer, or search Bing. Now, if in fact, for whatever weird reason, you don't have the option to search Bing, that's okay. Then just open up another tab, go to Google, search for an image, download it and save it to your computer, and then you can use the upload, or if you save it to your OneDrive, you can select it from there. Okay, so if for whatever reason it's not allowing you to, there's always a way around it. Let's see. All right, now I only have OneDrive on one. Okay, all right. So yeah, there's always a way around it. So if you don't have the ability to search directly in here, then just search for it on your own, save it to your OneDrive or computer, and then use those options. Now I see the question that also says, how do I send this survey to 100 people? You have to go to each person and select them one by one. Well, you have a couple of options, right? Now, if these 100 people are in a team in Microsoft Teams, you could just share the form through the team. Let me show you what that looks like. So if I go to collect responses and I click send invitation, notice that I can send it to an individual person or a group of people, a Microsoft 360, like a security group or a channel. So let's say I want to send it to a channel here, or a team here. So in our organization, we have a couple of security groups. Let me see if I can use this here. Notice I have an option to send this to all staff. So that's a security group. Or if I want to send it to everybody in the human resources, I can start typing human resources, and notice it allows me to send it to the general channel. You see that? So if these people are already grouped in some way, you can leverage the invitation and send it to that here. Now, as an alternative, and I see you said, well, unfortunately, I don't see that option. Well, here's the other option. Remember how I said you can copy the link, right? If you copy the link, and again, I can use the shortcut or the short link, I'm just going to copy the link, and then you can distribute this link however you want. For example, if this group of people are in a team in Microsoft Teams or in some kind of channel, you can post it there. Or if they are, or you can send it to in an email to all 100 people, or you can post that link in some kind of SharePoint site that everyone has access to, and then just let them know that they can access the form from that page. So for example, in Outlook, I can create an email, and I already have a distribution list called all training accounts. So notice it lets me address it. I can give it a subject, evaluation, and then paste the link there and send it off. Or in Teams, so for example, if I want to have everyone in the training team, I can go to whatever channel I want to post it in, create a new conversation, post the link there, okay? Notice it's posting it as a little image, and when I post it, people will be able to click on it. So there are multiple ways on how you can distribute it. You just have to think about which is the most efficient one for you. Okay, very good questions. All right, any other questions on Microsoft Forms? All right, well, I'll tell you what, we always actually like to collect feedback every time we provide training for the county. So what I'm going to do is in the meeting chat, I'm actually going to provide you the link to our actual class evaluation. So I'm going to ask if you don't have any questions, comments, or concerns. And Emmeline, I see your comment. Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. So as I was saying, I'm going to go ahead and post the information for today's class, as well as the link to our actual online form. So I'm going to ask if you don't mind taking a minute or so, if you can just go to that link, provide us your thoughts. Natasha, I see your comment. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great week as well. But yeah, so that evaluation is just a quick 2-minute evaluation. We would love to hear your thoughts. Other than that, once you have submitted that evaluation, we are dismissed. So I do want to thank everybody for attending today's session for Wednesday webinar on Microsoft Forms. And we are dismissed. After you fill out the evaluation, you are welcome to disconnect whenever you're ready. I will hang on for a couple of minutes just to see if there are any additional questions. But other than that, thank you all for attending today's session. Hope you got a lot out of it and hope to see you in some future training. Have a great rest of your day. All right, well, if there's no further questions, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Again, thank you all for joining today. Have a great rest of your day and good luck with Microsoft Forms. Bye-bye, everyone.